In the alleys, under bridges, across sidewalks, and along freeway overpasses, a different kind of American neighborhood has emerged, one not marked by white picket fences or trimmed lawns, but by plastic tarps, makeshift tents, and scavenged belongings. These are America's tent cities, the physical manifestation of a homelessness epidemic that has swelled over the last decade, quietly sprawling while the rest of society looks the other way. They are communities born out of desperation, stitched together by people who have nowhere else to go. Behind each tent flap is a story of collapse, a lost job, a medical emergency, a domestic crisis, a failed system. This isn't some isolated phenomenon restricted to one city or region. From Los Angeles to New York City, from Austin to Portland, the spread of tent encampments has become a symbol of deep social decay in a country that prides itself on prosperity. More than 500,000 people in the United States are homeless on any given night, and a growing percentage of them are unsheltered, living outdoors. What used to be temporary hidden encampments are now permanent fixtures on the American urban landscape. Once tucked away in alleyways or wooded areas, these tent communities are now in plain sight, right outside city halls, across from luxury apartment complexes, and steps away from bustling tourist destinations. The sight of human beings surviving in tents on public sidewalks should be unthinkable in a country that spends billions on defense, hosts some of the world's wealthiest individuals, and claims to lead the global economy. But instead of confronting this humanitarian emergency with compassion and urgency, American society often responds with discomfort, avoidance, and criminalization. Tent encampments are labeled as eyesores or public safety threats. Residents call for police sweeps. Cities impose ordinances that fine or jail people for sleeping outdoors. But rarely is the question asked, why are these people here to begin with? The truth is stark. Homelessness is not just the result of bad choices or personal failures. It is the direct outcome of economic inequality, policy neglect, and a housing market that has turned shelter into a commodity. Rent prices have exploded across the country, especially in cities with booming tech or finance industries. Wages, however, have not kept pace. For millions of working Americans, even full-time employment does not guarantee stable housing. A single missed paycheck, a medical bill, or a car breakdown can be enough to tip someone over the edge. Once that fall begins, climbing back up becomes nearly impossible. In many cities, there are simply not enough affordable homes. Public housing has been underfunded for decades, and the private sector has no incentive to build for those who earn the least. The result? Waiting lists that stretch for years, shelters that are overcrowded or unsafe, and thousands of people sleeping outside, using tents not by choice, but because there's no other option. Some carry their entire lives in shopping carts. Others try to build a sense of home with makeshift furniture, solar lights, or small flags. But no matter how much they try, the reality is grim. Living in a tent means exposure to extreme weather, theft, assault, and constant uncertainty. Many tent dwellers speak of the fear they carry every night. There's no lock to keep them safe, no walls to shield them from the cold or the stares of strangers. When it rains, their blankets get soaked. When it's hot, their tents become ovens. In winter, many freeze. The psychological toll is enormous. Anxiety, depression, paranoia, all are common. And still, day after day, these people endure because the alternative is worse. Sleeping on a sidewalk, under an open sky, or being herded into unsafe shelters where fights, theft, and abuse are rampant. The presence of drug use or mental illness in these communities is often cited by those who wish to dismiss or demonize the homeless. And yes, addiction and mental health challenges are part of the picture, but they're often the consequence, not the cause of homelessness. Living without shelter amplifies stress and trauma. Many turn to substances not to party, but to escape pain, stay awake at night for safety, or fight off hunger. Mental illness, too, goes untreated for lack of access to care. And even when help exists, navigating the bureaucracy of social services without a phone, ID, or address is an insurmountable task. Children live in these tents. Families, elderly people with failing health, veterans who once wore the uniform, LGBTQ+ teens rejected by their families, survivors of domestic abuse who had nowhere else to turn. They live just blocks from wealth, from skyscrapers, from universities and hospitals. Yet they remain invisible to those passing by. Sometimes they're ignored. Other times they're mocked. Often they're moved along like trash, swept out by city workers who throw away their possessions in an effort to clean up the area. But tents keep coming back because the root problem hasn't been solved. The pandemic made the situation worse. Millions lost their jobs, and with them, their ability to pay rent. While eviction moratoriums helped temporarily, they were never a real solution. When the protections ended, evictions surged. Landlords raised rents, stimulus checks ran out, and people already on the edge fell into homelessness. Many cities cut back on shelter capacity to prevent virus outbreaks, so more people were left on the street. Some cities saw tent populations double during the COVID years. And now, with inflation hitting food and fuel prices, many who were just barely hanging on are being pushed to the brink. Despite the magnitude of the crisis, comprehensive action has been frustratingly slow. Shelters are still treated as a primary solution, but they are not long-term answers. People need homes, not bunk beds in shared dormitories with curfews. Cities like Houston and Salt Lake City have shown that housing-first models, where people are given permanent housing and then offered services, can work. But too few cities follow this example. And even when housing is offered, it's often met with resistance from nearby residents who don't want low-income housing or shelters in their neighborhoods. This NIMBYism, or not in my backyard attitude, blocks progress and keeps people in tents. Meanwhile, billions are spent on policing and clearing camps, on court proceedings and jail time for petty violations. This money could be used to build housing, provide addiction treatment, or fund mental health services. But year after year, the same cycle continues. Tent cities are cleared, their residents scattered, only to reappear somewhere else. It is an expensive, cruel game of musical chairs, with no winner and no end. It's also worth noting that homelessness isn't a failure of the individual, it's a failure of the system. In other developed countries, homelessness exists, but not at the scale or severity seen in the US. Why? Because they treat housing as a human right. They invest in public housing, healthcare, and safety nets. In America, housing is a market-driven privilege. If you can't pay, you're out. The result is predictable and inhumane. And yet, hope is not lost. Across the country, grassroots organizations are stepping up. Volunteers deliver food, clothing, hygiene kits, and medical care to people in tents. Mutual aid groups advocate for the rights of the unhoused. Some cities are experimenting with tiny home villages, sanctioned encampments, and harm reduction models. These are not perfect solutions, but they are steps in the right direction, steps that recognize the humanity of those living without roofs. But we need more. We need a national reckoning. We need policies that don't just manage homelessness, but end it. We need to stop criminalizing poverty and start investing in prevention. That means affordable housing, mental health care, rent control, job programs, and re-entry support for those coming out of prisons or institutions. It means listening to the homeless themselves, understanding what they need, and giving them agency in the solutions. The tent cities of America should be a national shame, but they can also be a call to action. These makeshift communities reflect the cracks in the foundation of a country that was supposed to offer opportunity and security. If we are to rebuild that foundation, it must begin with shelter, with dignity, with the belief that no one should be left to sleep in the shadows. Every person in a tent was once like anyone else, working, dreaming, surviving. Homelessness does not make them less human. What makes us less human is our willingness to accept it. The crisis won't be solved overnight, but the longer we wait, the more tents will rise, the more lives will unravel, and the more we will have to answer for. The time to act is now, not with pity, but with resolve, not with punishment, but with purpose. Because every day we delay, another person falls. Another child goes to sleep afraid. Another veteran wakes up on cold concrete, and another tent becomes someone's last chance at shelter in the richest country on earth.